So anyone on the phone, did you guys try the commands, and do you have any question, or you have any questions from yesterday? You can unmute yourself and speak. For those of you who just joined, we were asking, did you have any questions from yesterday? Go ahead, unmute your phone and ask the questions if you have any. So all questions are good, guys. I mean, don't think it's a silly question or anything like that. Okay, Gaurish, maybe you could just do a quick recap and then we get started.
Yeah, thanks, Ganesh. Once again, welcome everyone. I'll just do a quick recap on what we did yesterday. So I'll just give a quick recap on EC2. EC2 is nothing but one of the compute machines in AWS where you can use that to install your machines in cloud. So you can use any OS if you want. Like it also supports not just Linux. It also supports Windows. So you can use any of the machines to get installed in the cloud, so that you can install any application server on top of the EC2 machines and access them remotely from where you are sitting in your location. Apart from that, we also looked at RDS. So yesterday we were facing an issue with the RDS. So how RDS works is, RDS is nothing but a relational database service provided by AWS, where you can install a database server in the cloud and access the database remotely. So how RDS works is, how RDS helps us, so if you want your application to connect to any of the database, you need not to have the database installed at your place or your data center. Instead, install the database in the cloud and have this accessed by your application running at a different machine. RDS also gives you different types of engines. It not only gives you engines like MySQL or Postgres, it also supports Oracle where you need the license. So AWS takes care of getting the license for you and gives you an Oracle database server as well as the Microsoft SQL server. So you can use any of the database to connect to your application. So I'll just quickly do a recap on like what we were doing in on RDS last day. So I'll just go ahead and create the database. So guys, you are able to see my screen?
We can see the slide.
Okay. I just moved on to RDS console. Let me stop presenting and are you guys able to see the AWS console?
No.
Okay.
It's coming up now. Okay, we don't see the console, but I think we can see your screen.
Okay, I think there is a network glitch. Let me connect to my mobile. Are you guys able to see the console now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and create the database which we were doing last day. Let me click on the create database. I'll click on MySQL. Okay, the issue which we were facing last day was uh, MySQL 8. The SQL Pro tool which I was using doesn't support MySQL 8. So I'll go ahead and select the MySQL 5. And then I'll choose free tier. I'll give a name as AWS demo DB. And then I'm choosing admin as a username, and I'll choose auto generate the password. I'll choose the free tier database instance type, and then I'm leaving all others default. I'm just going to make it publicly accessible and create a new security group. Yes, security group. Now preference for the availability zone. I'm choosing password authentication. Let me go ahead and create the database. So it's getting created. No, so if you want to make it if you want to make it private, you would be able to access it only within the AWS resources, and you would not be able to access it from your outside the AWS network. For example, if I want to access my database from my local computer, which is not in the AWS network, then it has to be public. So when you want to make it private is, let's say if your application needs to be connected only by your application that resides in the AWS, then it's a better use case to create your database as private and connect it within the AWS network. For dev or for demo, we would need to connect to the database from our local computer, execute the queries. In that case, you can use it to make it public. So I'll view the credentials. I'll just copy the password. So it's getting created. So still the endpoint is not coming up. Meanwhile, let's go and see the security group it created. I'm viewing the inbound rules. Since we created our database on the port 3306, the security group is created with port 3306 open for my IP address. So only I would be able to connect to the database with this port now. If we want to make it open, then we can edit this inbound rule and make the sources anywhere instead of my only IP address. It's taking a bit to create the database. So meanwhile, it's getting created. Like for the people who have joined late, like if you have any questions on the previous day session, like please ask me in the chat. Okay, we got the endpoint now. It's just backing up. It's the final step of the database creation. So let me copy this endpoint. Quickly open SQL Pro. So I'm going to create a new connection in my SQL Pro tool. Demo database. And then I'm just going to give the host name, whatever I copied as the endpoint. Username, we gave admin as the master username. And I copy the password which we noted. And let me save the changes. Okay, I got connected to the database. So now if you see, I don't have any new database created within this. So I can add a new database to this server. And I'm going to name it as AWS demo database. I'm using this DB now. Let's go ahead and create a table. So I'm just making a create table as participants. So I have one field automatically created as an ID, and then I create one more field as name. Make it as varchar. And okay, I just created one table for just a demo purpose with just two fields, ID and name. So let me go ahead and execute a query. So you can see no rows. So let's try to insert. Okay, I just inserted one query, one entry, and I'm able to select this. So if you see, this is a database which is installed in remote, but we could still be able to connect to the database, perform query operations or insert operations in on the table. So once we open the inbound port for others, they would also be they would also be able to connect to the database and perform any queries on the database. So this way, AWS helps in not setting up your database locally to perform any applications. Instead, the database can be in a cloud, and anybody would be able to access it, uh, the database which is in the cloud. So, any questions? So, the issue which we were facing is the SQL Pro tool which I was using doesn't support MySQL 8. And I just created now with the lower version MySQL 5, which is the LTA version of MySQL. So it's working fine now with the MySQL version 5. Any questions? Okay. I'll take it as no. So I'll move on to the next sessions.
Gorish, there was one question, I think, in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yes, you can use Oracle instead of SQL. I didn't get your question. SQL is a query language and Oracle is an engine, right? So instead of, if your question is instead of MySQL, yes, you can use Oracle instead of MySQL. Sure, you can use any engine if you want. It's not like just you have to use MySQL. You can use Oracle, you can use Postgres. or you can also use Microsoft MS SQL. Okay. So in today's session, I'll be talking about Lambdas and S3. So I'll give a brief introduction on what Lambda is. Lambda is called as serverless in AWS. So why it is called that? So at the end of the session, you would know what is serverless and how you can create the serverless application, uh, and how we can manage these serverless applications. So first, let me talk about serverless. Serverless or Lambdas, they both refer the same. Few people call it as Lambdas, few people call it as serverless. First, I'll explain why it is called as serverless. Uh, AWS gives you a provision where you can just upload your code, and then this code gets deployed only when there is a request. For example, let's say I have a code, I want to execute this once somebody asks me what is the output of this code. So in case of EC2 instance, which we have created previously in the last session, that EC2 instance is running 24/7, or it would run whenever you start it, and it stops only when you stop it. So let's say somebody wants to run an application on the server, and there is only two requests coming in per day. Like we don't know what time it is. So what we will do is we will run it 24/7 so that the request comes in and then it gets executed and the response is given back. Now, why do I need to spend so much if there is only two requests coming in and yeah, so only if two requests are coming in and if only minimal requests are coming in, why I need to run this whole time? So what AWS gives a provision is just submit the code to AWS Lambda service, and this Lambda service would be executed only when there is a request coming in. So example is, let's say if I submitted a Lambda code and somebody is invoking the Lambda, then what AWS will do is it goes and deploys the code which we submitted into one of the EC2 machine, executes it, and then gives back a response to the trigger whoever invoked. So if you see this code, as part of one step, we are just uploading a code to the Lambda service. That's it. So we are not executing the code, we are just submitting the code. So once you submit the code is available in Lambda service. Now, in any future, I can invoke this Lambda. So once I invoke this Lambda, it can be the trigger can be anything. So AWS supports once you upload a file to S3, you can invoke this Lambda. It can be an API which triggers this Lambda, or it can be a message in SQS which can trigger this Lambda. So these are the different triggers which AWS supports. So once this Lambda is invoked, what AWS will do is it will go ahead quickly deploy this code which we submitted as part of step one into one of the machine and then execute the code and then gives back the response. It just not only supports for very fewer requests, it can also support for too much scaling of the requests. For example, let's say 100 requests are coming in very quickly at a same given time. Then if you are having your application in EC2, it may not scale because let's say if your application has only one RAM, 1 GB RAM, and then it will not be able to handle 100 requests but at a particular time. But with this Lambda, it will go ahead and deploy the code into n machines for n parallel requests. So if it is n parallel requests coming in at the same time, then it will deploy this code every time. It will deploy this code into individual machine, and for each request, it will process and gives back the response. So that's way it would not only helps in getting the cost reduced, but also supports scaling. So this is a better use case for POC where like you want to quickly test something or try out something. Uh, Serverless is the best use case. Also, if you don't know what time the request comes in and what time the my application would scale, then serverless is one of the best options so that it scales based on the request. So it is not scaled before. It is scaled only based on how many requests are coming in at a particular time. So that's why it is called a serverless. It still holds a server to execute, but the server is not running all the time. The server is running only when there is a trigger or only when there is a request to invoke this Lambda. I'll take a pause here. Let me know if you have any questions about Lambda before we move on to the hands-on. Okay, I'll take it as no. I'll move on to the next thing. So I'll do a quick demo on creating a Lambda. So in AWS, you can go to the service called Lambda. So I'm navigating to this Lambda service in AWS. So Lambda supports n different languages. I'll show how many languages it supports. It's not like you can just create a Lambda in JavaScript or Java. It also supports Python or C# or .NET. So I'll go ahead and create a function. So for easy purpose, I'll choose JavaScript because it's very easy to create a JavaScript application. So I'm just going to name this function as AWS demo Lambda. I'm going to choose Node.js 12.x as runtime. If you see the list of languages supported for a Lambda is .NET, Go, Java, Python, Ruby, and it also supports the deprecated as like older versions of the languages. So you can choose whatever language with whatever version you want. I'm going to choose Node.js 12 for now. And then it requires a permission. This Lambda requires a permission. So it is. So if you are executing a Lambda, you want to see what is the logs out of this Lambda. So how you can see this logs is there is a service called CloudWatch in AWS where this logs would be available in the CloudWatch service. So I'm just giving a permission. There is a default permission in AWS called Lambda Basic Execution Role. So it would just have a permission to upload the logs to CloudWatch. So I'm going to select this. So don't go deep into IAM for now. I'll just assume like this is a default rule which is required for the Lambda to put the logs into CloudWatch. I'm going to click create function. So if you see the Lambda is getting created, it is loading the sample code. Okay, so it has created and it has a sample code. So I'm just going to leave the sample code and then just this. So if you see, I have not deployed this Lambda in any of the EC2 machine. I haven't deployed it in any of the application server. It is just a code which is deployed. So now if I go ahead and test it, so you can use this console to test, where you can on the top right you can see test event. So I'm just going to name this as test event name and then test it. So once I click on this test, I just got this response, whatever is there in the code which we have submitted. So how this works is, once I click on the test button here, AWS will go ahead and deploy this code into a machine, execute this application or execute this function block, and then returns whatever the response is required. So let's say if 5 requests are coming in parallelly, how do I scale? So Lambda is one of the best use case so that it would scale based on the number of requests. So if 5 parallel requests are coming in, all the 5 requests can be served simultaneously by deploying deploying the same code in 5 different machines if it is parallel. If there is a difference in the execution time or the request coming in time, then it would use the same same machine where the code is already deployed. So, so I'll talk about like how you can use this as a reusable method. So in JavaScript, the in event is the input to the Lambda. So you can submit any event and do a basic operations on event. So let's say we want to do a addition example as for a just take a small example where you want to add 2 numbers. So let's say you have event as num1 and num2. So we want to return event.num1 plus event.num2. So let me go ahead and test it. Like you would see what happens. Okay, I think I need to save this. Okay, so it returned me null because in JavaScript there is no if undefined, if you add 2 undefined numbers, it would give a null. So the issue is if we go to the events, you see, I just have key1, key2, and key3 as the JSON data as an input. So instead, we have to have num1 and num2. So I just change it to okay, I'm gonna save it. Let me test it. Okay, you can see I got the response 25. So what it did is it just added 2 numbers which came as an input. So now you can consider this as a reusable app. Based on the input, I'm going to process something and then return the response. So if you see when I modified this code and then I click on test button, it took a bit to give me a response. And then when I keep on running the application, running the Lambda every time, second time, it is giving the response very quickly. The reason is for the first time when you make any changes to the code is about to get deployed in a EC2 machine, so that it took a bit of time to deploy the code to give a response. Any further requests, it will reuse the same container. If there is no request for 10, if there is no request for 10 minutes, it will go ahead and destroy the container. Here I mean container as EC2 machine. So to reiterate, once you submitted a code, it just resides in Lambda service. Once you make a request, this code gets into deployed into EC2 machine, process it, gives back the response, and the code is still there in the container for 10 minutes. So any new request coming in, the same container would be able to respond. And if there is no request for 10 minutes, AWS will go ahead and destroy this container. So if next request comes after 10 minutes, then it would take a bit time to deploy the code into a machine, runs the application and gives back the response. So that's why it is called a serverless, because there is no server running every time, and the server is created only when there is a request. And this is one of the most widely used service in AWS because it helps in throttling, it helps in scaling your request. For example, if numerous requests comes at a given time, my Lambda would be able to scale to that level. So I'll quickly show you what are the settings in the Lambda. So if you see, there is a basic settings which says what is the memory of the Lambda which I have submitted. For example, if my process, if my business logic code which I am writing in the Lambda requires a lot of memory to execute, then I can change the memory. So I can click on edit. You can see you can change the memory from 128 to a max of 3 GB. So it still supports a memory RAM of 3 GB and then timeout. So the maximum timeout a Lambda can take in is 15 minutes. So I have to run this. My business logic should be able to respond back within 15 minutes. I can still go ahead and change the timeout to a lesser value. And if my code doesn't give a response within that particular time, it would return a timeout error, which means like I'm not able to complete my execution within the timeout specified here. Mm. Apart from basic settings, one more settings to note down is concurrency. What does concurrency mean here is how many requests can this be supported parallelly? So I would be able to support 1,000 requests parallelly coming to this Lambda. So if 1,000 requests are hitting this Lambda at the same given time, then what it will do is it will do go ahead and deploy this code into 10 different contain 1,000 different containers, able to run the all 1,000 requests, process them, and then return the response. So this is what it helps in scaling. So at a given time, if numerous requests like till 1,000 comes in, it would be able to process the request and give the response back. So that's what it means by concurrency. So I'll pause here. If you have any questions, let me know. What are what are the different methods of triggering a Lambda? Okay, so uh, triggering a Lambda is an event-driven based. So if I show you this, okay, so I just added few triggers here, which is like S3, API Gateway, SQS, SNS, Kinesis, DynamoDB. AWS supports different triggers for a Lambdas. So one of the best use cases, if I want to hit an API, and if the API can be backed by a Lambda. So take an example, a user registration service. So let's say I want to create a new user in a system. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and invoke an API. That API can go ahead and invoke a Lambda, and that Lambda would be gets the input, puts the data into the database. So if you see, this is the common use case for registration. So it need not to be just API gateway. It can also be an S3 event. So if I put an object into S3, and if that can also go ahead and invoke a Lambda. If I put a message in queue, that can also go ahead and invoke a Lambda. If I put a message into DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database in AWS, it can go ahead and deploy. It can go ahead and invoke the Lambda. So these are the different triggers available for Lambda. I can go quickly show, if you see the add trigger button in the Lambda section. So if I click on that, it will list all the list of triggers for a Lambda. So these are different triggers supported for Lambdas. So one is API gateway, IoT, Alexa skill, load balancers, CloudWatch event, code commit, DynamoDB, Kinesis, S3, SNS, and SQS. So these are the different triggers for the Lambdas. What will be the size of the EC2 machine allocated to Lambda? Okay, so by size, it means the memory of the Lambda, memory of the machine, which is nothing but what you choose when you're in the basic settings where you can change the memory from 128 to till 128 MB to 3 GB. So there is no storage associated to it because it doesn't persist any data in the Lambda. So it's kind of there's no code saved in the function. It just executes and returns back the response. So only the memory is associated to the lambdas. So the number of CPUs, that's a different setting where you can do it for lambdas. Currently, it supports only one CPU, and it automatically scales based on what is the memory you're choosing. So there is a mapping which AWS maintains to find out, like, for a given memory, it would choose how many CPU core it needs and picks that based on the memory. Can you please suggest how to use CloudWatch to check the logs? Yeah, sure. Okay, so I did not add any logs to the statement. So what I'll do is quickly add a log statement, console.log json.stringify of event. So this event is nothing but what we are giving as an input. So let me go ahead and save this code and let me test it. Okay. So it executed. So let me go to CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is one of the services in AWS. So let me navigate CloudWatch. So on the left side, you can see log groups. So CloudWatch logs are stored under the log group sections. I'm navigating to the log groups. And then you can see /AWS/Lambda. So since we want to see the logs of Lambdas, it would be under /AWS/Lambda. And then what is the function we created? So let's say if we have two Lambdas created, so let's say AWS demo Lambda is one of the one which we created. And if we have created one more Lambda, AWS demo 1, then you would see two entries here, /AWS/Lambda/function name, and one more with the same different function name. So since we had only one, I'm clicking on this. So this is a log group. Log group will have the list of executions for this Lambda. And if you see, there are three entries here. So every time I click on a test, or every time a request is invoked for a Lambda, it would create a new execution for this. And if the same container is reused, it would be under the same execution. So let's say if we, so I'll open the latest one, and you can see there is an info log added, num1, num2 as 15. So you can add as many log statements in your code, and you can see all the log statements here. So let me go ahead and change the code. I just modified the code and saving it. And then, so just take a look. There is only three executions as of now. So let me go ahead and test this Lambda now. Okay, I got the response. Now let me refresh this CloudWatch logs. You could see one more entry came in. So which is, I think this is the latest one. Let me open this. And okay, you can see returning the value 25. Now just assume I'm not making any changes to the code, just hitting the test button again, which means one more request coming in. If you go back to the list of executions, you would still see only 4. I'm just refreshing so that you see there is only 4 now. Let me go to the latest one. Okay, so you can see it got appended. So which means the same container is used. That's why the same execution log is also created. So which means if there is two requests coming in sequence, which means I can reuse the same container where I have deployed the code so that I need not to create one more container to process this because I have already created. Why I need to deploy this code into another container? That's why you can see the execution is also in the same CloudWatch execution. Every time you make any changes to the code, it gets deployed as a new execution. So if you make any changes, it would come as a new execution. Or if you hit this test button after 10 minutes, because after 10 minutes, the container would already be destroyed. So it would go ahead and create a new execution here. So you can easily relate one entry here points to one container. So if you see three different executions within the same one, which means the same container is used to serve three different requests. So this is how you would use CloudWatch to debug the your application. Any more questions? Okay. So I'll quickly move on to how we can use AWS. Isn't there a limit on the duration of the function? Yes. So that's what we have configured as a timeout for our Lambda. So this timeout indicates how long my function can be executed. So the maximum is 15 minutes and the minimum is 1 second. So if your process takes more time, you can change this timeout to change it to 15 minutes so that it takes at least a huge amount of time to process and respond back. The max is 15 minutes. Okay. So I'll go ahead and talk about how we can use libraries and lambdas. So if you're familiar in Java, you would have used a lot of dependencies to in your Java application. Similarly, in JavaScript, you can also use dependencies called libraries or npm dependencies.
Hey, Gaurish,
So
there's
I'll
one more
go ahead
question
and
on Lambda.
use. Okay. Does Lambda supports versioning? Yes. So yeah, so I'll talk about versioning now. Uh, that's a good point. So versioning is nothing but how do I create a lamp same code with two different, like let's say I want to have, I'm testing a Lambda code and it works perfectly fine. I want to make some more changes before I deploy it to production. So the same code needs to be the previous change needs to point to production, and then I'm making some changes to the code, and still the old code should be pointing to production, and I just use the new code for testing. So that's where a versioning is used. So if you go to Lambda section, if you click on actions, you can see a published new version. So if you see whatever the latest code you have created, you can create a version for that. So I'm just giving production version. So what it will do is it will go ahead and create a version number for this. So you can see AWS demo lambda colon 1. Similarly, I now have you can see this is pointing to version 1. So now you can make only changes to the latest code. So let's do this. Version 1 should do addition and version 2 should do subtraction. So it's the same code, but two different business logic. So what I'll do is I'm going to the latest code and then I'm just making it as subtraction. Okay, I'm just saving the code. So now the latest code points to a subtraction. Okay, I'm going to publish this, the latest version to a version 2. So let's say it is dev version. So now if you see, our production version is doing a sum and our dev version is doing a subtraction. So you can see this is the ARN. So I just quickly copy this. Okay. So if whenever you want to invoke a Lambda, you can use without the version number. So this is a naming convention used in AWS. If you want to execute a Lambda or invoke a Lambda, you have to give this format ARN AWS Lambda and which region it is and what is the account number, function colon what is the function name. So this will go ahead and execute the latest version code. And if I give colon version number, it will go ahead and execute the version number which it is pointing to. So if we give colon 1, the same code would give a addition response. And if we give colon 2, it would give a subtraction response. So just take an example that we did addition and subtraction, but in real world or in the real scenario, we would keep adding new changes to an existing code as part of new requirements. So that way you can, your production is pointing to just the existing version, existing logic. And as you're testing, you can create a new version, make changes to the code, test it, and then points, create the new version once it is ready, and then points your production to that version. So now let me just execute the two different versions. So if I want to execute version 1, choose the version 1 here, and then I click test. I get 25 because we gave addition in the version 1. I'll choose version 2. And quickly test. You can see -5 like because it was a subtraction. So this is how version is used uh, to point your same code with two different logics. Okay. So I gave you an example. Okay, if you don't give the version number, it would execute the latest code. So you would be able to make changes only to the latest code, and any latest code would be executed if you don't give the version number. There is one more naming terminology used in Lambda called as alias. So alias is nothing but what instead of version number, what else you can use. So let's say now I'm just take this example. I'm pointing my production to version number 1 and my dev is pointing to version number 2. So in production or in your code, you would have mentioned if production use version number 1, if dev use the version number 2. So every time you make any changes or you publish any more version, you have to go ahead and change your code to point to the new version. So let's say now you have submitted v3 for production and then v4 for dev. So what it will require is it will require a code change in your code to make this production to 3 and then dev to 4, which is not the best case because you are updating your code every time you are publishing a new version. So what AWS gives you is instead of version number, you can use alias. So I can use colon prod, I can use colon dev, I can create as many alias I want, and then I'll go ahead and point my prod alias to whatever version name I want. So this will reduce the code change you require. So what I'll do is I'll say if prod alias, if alias is prod, then it goes to version 3. If alias is dev, it goes to version 4. So if you see here, you can create an alias. So I just call it as prod alias. And then which version should point to prod? So I'll say version 1 points to prod alias. So I'll just go ahead and create. So now instead of invoking this lambda with version number, here I can use :prod. So prod will point to version 1. So in my application code, I need not to make any changes because every time it would be on the version 1. So I'll go to prod. So I'll go to prod. If I want to point my to a different alias, you can go ahead and I'll choose alias, go to prod, and then you can change alias to a different version. So that's how alias helps in reducing the code changes at your application. Any questions? Okay. So I'll quickly talk about how we can use libraries in your Lambdas. So we just use one of a sample, very simple Lambda, which doesn't require any dependencies. Like let's say you want to use one of the dependencies in which is a module which can be used by your code. For example, in Java, you would have used a lot of jars as a dependency in your application. Similarly, in JavaScript, I'm going to use one of the dependencies. So let me quickly show you code which I created with Lambda with dependencies. So you can see, I mean, so I have created a Lambda that required UUID as a node module. So this is a module, and I'm using this, say, so this is one of the package in Node.js which can be used to give a unique identifier. I'm just using it for simplicity. So you have to install this using npm install command. So okay, I'll create it fresh so that you will understand it easily. So if you want to create a Lambda which requires a library, you have to create a folder structure and use it. So I'll go ahead and create a folder Lambda. So I'm going to Lambda. So npm init is a command that would create a Node.js or npm folder structure for you. I'm just leaving everything as default. So you can see it created a package.json. So if the package.json will have any dependency if you are using. So since I want to use a UUID dependency, I'll go ahead and use this dependency UUID with the version number 3.3.3. So I'll open this package.json and then add this dependency. So this dependency is added to this project. So if you want to, so if you see, this just still has only the package.json. So now I do npm install command. So what it will do is it will download the dependencies and puts it into a folder here. So you see node, there is a folder called node modules created. So if you go into this node modules, it will have the dependency created. I mean the dependency downloaded. So let me create a index.json, index.js, which would be our input to our code. I just quickly copy this code. Okay, so this is my Lambda code. So what it does is it uses this library. Consider this as an import statement. It imports this library and uses this method to return a unique number. So now if you want to create this as a Lambda, and let's go ahead and create a Lambda, a new Lambda which has a dependency. So AWS Lambda, I'm going to name it as AWS Lambda dependency. I'll choose Node.js 12.x. Let me choose the same permission we created. Lambda basic execution role, create function. Okay. So if you see, it shows edit code inline. How? So I can only edit a code, like, but in our case, you can see there are like lot of folders created, and inside these folders you could see lot of subfolders it has, right? How would I able to create all these files in the Lambda? So you need not to just edit the file, you can also create a zip file of this Lambda and upload it. So what I'll do is I'll quickly zip it. I'm just using a zip command in my Mac to bundle everything here. So if you see, there is a lambda.zip created. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and upload a zip file. So there is an option in the Lambda. You can see edit code online or upload a zip file. So let me upload a zip file. Choose upload, and then okay, I choose lambda.zip here. Oh, let me save. So if you see now it has index.js package and then node modules, all the modules which we have imported. So now let me go ahead and test it. So it requires a input, just naming it as test event. So I ran and I got a unique number. So this is nothing but the UUID. So I, I'm just running it every time to see if there is a unique number changes. And yes, this number keeps on changing. So if you see what it does is it just imported a library which is there in the node modules and then use that library to return a response. So this is how dependencies can also be used in your lambdas. So your lambda can need not to be just a single execution file. It can use different modules to perform operations for you and return a response. So this is how you would use libraries in lambdas. So it is not just with Node.js. You can also use Java or Python to use libraries. So, any questions? Okay. So let me go back to my slide. So if you see, we have talked about like what is serverless. We have created a Lambda using JavaScript. We have executed the Lambda. We have seen the different settings of the Lambdas. And we have also seen accessing the logs of the Lambda using CloudWatch. Now I'll talk about dependency management. So I have shown an example where we used a library. Okay. So consider you have four different and each lambda is using a different libraries. So let's say you have lambda A, lambda B, lambda C, and lambda D. And let's say lambda A is using dependency P, Q, R. So these are like three different libraries a lambda is using. And you have one more lambda which uses a lambda dependency R and dependency S. And you have a lambda C which uses dependency P, dependency R, and dependency S. And you have one more lambda which uses dependency D, dependency E, and dependency F. which uses all the 4 dependencies. So now if you want to create these 4 lambdas, you have to bundle create lambda A. So in lambda A, you would bundle it with your functional logic of lambda A plus dependency P plus dependency Q plus dependency R. Similarly, for lambda B, you would create it with the function of B plus dependency R and S. Similarly for lambda C and similarly for lambda D. So you are creating 4 different packages which has the same dependencies bundled in a different way in each of the lambdas. So if you see the size of this lambda would be the size of function A plus size of dependencies. Similarly, this is will add to this dependency size. This will also add to the dependency size, and this will also add to the dependency size. So now it's a disadvantage of creating same dependencies in multiple lambdas. Like why can't we just reuse it? So that's where layers is a service introduced by lambdas. So how layers works is, so instead of bundling only PQR as a dependencies to lambda A and only R and S to lambda B, what you can do is bundle all the libraries as one layer and all your lambdas can use that layer. So that way, so if you see, I bundled lambda dependency A, dependency P, dependency Q, dependency R, and dependency S as one layer. So which means it is just using the layer. So the layer contains all the dependencies. Now what lambdas can do is it can have a link to that layer and use that, so that it reduces the package size of your each lambda, and yeah, it reduces the package size of the lambdas, and it helps in managing the dependencies at one place. So you need not have the dependencies added at each function. Instead, you create only one layer and use that as a dependencies management. So if you see the right side picture, I would just have only the functional code in my lambda, and it would have a link to that layer, so that it would not use the it would not be bundled with the too much dependencies. Instead, it would point to a layer. So let me quickly show how layers. So if you see in the lambdas, there is a section called layers under in the configuration section. So if you choose that, you can add a layer, and that layer would be used as an dependencies for this lambda. So I think I'll quickly demonstrate. So let me go ahead and create a function. I'll choose the same settings. Okay. So let me copy this code, the same code, and so if you see, I just have index.js. I'm using library, but I have not added this libraries here. So let me save it and run it. So it would throw an error because it is not able to find this library because there is no node modules folder exists here. So you can see the log cannot find module uuid/v4. So what we can do is, let's go to layers section, create a layer with this dependency. So let me create a layer. So if you want to create a layer, it requires that node modules folder as a zip file. So okay, I just created a layer structure here. I'll delete the okay. So if you see, I have just the package.json here, which says what is the library it is using. So let me do npm install so that it will create the node modules folder, and then we will upload this node modules as a zip file to layer. So you can see node modules folder is here. So I just navigate to where this node.js folder is there. Let me zip it. So I just created a zip file which has the all the dependencies. In this case, I have created only one dependency. But let's say if you are using 4 dependencies or 9 to 10 different dependencies, you can all bundle them into one Node.js folder and use the and upload that as a layer. So let me go ahead and name this as AWS demo layer and then upload a zip file. Desktop. Okay, I'm just choosing this layer.zip file. Let me. Okay, you can choose what are the different runtime versions this layer can support. I'm just choosing 12.x. You can also choose multiple runtimes up to 5 and then create. So what it does is it is going to create a layer with all the dependencies we have uploaded. So you can see it created a layer. So now let me go back to my Lambda. I'm going to use this Lambda. You can see still it has only index.js, but no node modules. So what I'm going to do is go to layer section, add a layer, and then select this layer with the new version we have created and add it. Okay, if you see, still it has only index.js, and your function is not bundled with your layer or not bundled with the node modules folder. So if I go in and execute it now, I got the response. I got this UUID. How it worked is there is a symlink created between this function and this layer. So whenever this layer is configured for a Lambda, it would go in and use this require as an import statement would be picked from this layer and executed. So in that way, it helps in keeping only your business logic in your Lambda and have your all dependencies separated out. That is one advantage. Also, edit code inline is supported only if your Lambda size is less than 10 MB or 8 MB. So if you say if you have dependencies itself more than 10 MB, you would not be able to edit the code online inline. You have to every time upload the zip file to test it, which is like a time consuming process and would reduce your productivity as well. So instead, what you can do is if you use layer, you can only have your function business logic here, and you can easily keep changing it within the AWS console to test it to see the changes rapid. So if you see that is this why I made it as dotted line and here is because it is symbolically linked, not directly linked or not directly bundled with each of your lambdas. So that's how layer is reduces your package size and also keeps your functional code separated. I'll take a pause here. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, I'll take it as a no. So let me move on. So this is with the Lambdas. So I'll move on to S3. So in the next few 15 to 20 minutes, let's talk about S3. So S3 is one of the object storage service provided by AWS. So let's say if you want to store any of your objects in cloud, you can use S3. Similar to you have Google Drive, similar to Dropbox, S3 is also an object storage service provided by AWS. In this session, let's talk about like how we will create an S3 bucket, how we can upload an objects to S3, how we can version our objects in S3, and S3 also supports static website hosting. I'll talk about static website hosting at the end. Uh, just consider S3 as an object storage service provided by AWS, where you can upload your files and you can retrieve it whenever you need. So this is one of the simplest services in AWS and used very widely. So I'll quickly demonstrate how we can create a S3 bucket. So in S3, in AWS names, S3 is called as a bucket. So each folder you're creating or each uh, grouping of your folders are called as bucket. So in S3, you would create a bucket to upload any folders or any files into it. So let me navigate to S3. Okay, so I don't have any buckets created. I'll go ahead and create a bucket. So the bucket name should be unique across accounts, across regions, across the globe. So in AWS, irrespective of I hold an AWS account and you holding an AWS account, the bucket name we are creating should be unique across the globe. So I cannot create a same bucket in one account and the same name can be used in a different account also. So I'll go ahead and create a bucket. So I'll use this AWS demo bucket. So you can choose in which region the bucket has to be created. I'll choose Mumbai. And then there is some settings where you can say, do you want to block all public access or not? So this is to ensure that this bucket is secured and nobody would be able to access it uh, by public. Without access to your AWS account, nobody should be able to access it. So I'm just going to keep it, block all public access and create the bucket. Okay, so if you see, bucket with the same name already exists. If you see, I did not had any buckets created with the same name in my account, but looks like somebody would have used this bucket in a different account, and hence I get this error that bucket name with the same name already exists. So I'm going to create it, right? Add, okay. Let me create the bucket. Oops. Did it create? Yeah, I think it created with this name AWS Cloud Demo Bucket. So let me go ahead into the bucket. And you can see upload option or create folders. You can create folders in your bucket and upload a file, or you can directly upload a file. So you can have end folders, you can have end files, you can have everything. So I'll go ahead and create an upload, add a file. So I just create a file. I just created a file and named it as s3.txt. So let me add this file. I created. I'm just uploading this file and click on upload button. So now this file is uploaded to your bucket and you would be able to access this file within your AWS account. You can see now this file is available here. So if you click this file, you can see an object URL. So this is the URL of the file to access. So if you access this, you would not be able to access because we have blocked it. I'm opening an incognito window and I hit this URL and I get an access denied because we had a setting that mentions that we are blocking all the public access to this bucket. So you can see there is a button called make public, but that is disabled. So you can't even make it public because the bucket settings itself ensures that you cannot have a public access to this bucket. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll change the settings to unblock all public access. So this is just to demo. I'm making it public access, but in real scenario, we would not allow any files to be publicly accessible unless it is important to access it public. So I'll go ahead and edit and remove this checkbox and save it. Ask me to confirm and form. Okay. So now let's go ahead and try to access the file. Okay, I'm getting access denied still because the public settings is to a file level as well. So you have to make the settings for an individual file to access the file. So if you see there is a button called make public for this file, which is nothing but s3.txt. So I go ahead and change this, make it as public. So now if we go ahead and access this URL, you can see this data, like which means we are able to access this file without any authentication. So now let me make some changes to the file and upload it. Okay, I made a change to the file and let me upload the same file. Okay. So I uploaded this file, it is uploaded. So let's go to access this file now. You see the permission is like it's gone. So I need to make the settings again. So I'll go ahead and make it public. So every time you upload the file, because we did not made the settings, so I'll go ahead and make this file as public again. Let me uh, access the file again. Okay, you can see I'm able to see the content. AWS training is awesome. Hope everyone is enjoying. So now, let's say I want to see what are the changes happened in the same file. How do I see what are the different versions of the file created? So if you go to the file, and if you see this, it shows latest version. And you can see only the latest version is listed here. So which means I cannot access my old version of the file. So there is a settings in S3 which you have to enable to store the versions of a same file. So if you go to properties, there is an option called versioning. So let's say I click on enable versioning. So it is not by default versioning is enabled for a bucket. You have to explicitly enable the version for your bucket. So I'll go ahead and enable the version now. Click on save. Okay, so now it says it is enabled. So now let's see if I can see the old versions. You would not be able to see because you just enable the version, and AWS will not save until you enable the versions. So since we have enabled the versions now, let's try to make any changes to the file and upload it. Okay, I just made one change. Let me upload the file. Upload. Okay. So now if you click here, may refresh. You can see the two different versions now. So if I go to the old one, you can see a version ID equal to null is there. So which means every time you upload this file, it would create a version for it. So now let's make more changes and upload the file and see, then it should have three different versions. Okay. So let me add the file. Okay, so upload has started. Okay, it is completed. So now let me refresh here. You can see three different versions here. So version ID null, and you can see version ID some number, and then it has one more with the latest version. So now you can access all the versions of the same file. So this is helpful if you want to see what are the changes eventually made on a single file. So this would help in storing all the versions of a same file so that you can see what are the changes happen eventually over a period of time. So let me quickly show this. I'll go to the latest version. I need to make it public. Okay, you can see this is the latest version. Now let me choose the previous version. You can also see the timings added in the version number. I mean the title. I'll copy the version and make it public. Okay, you can see this is the different version. So this is not the latest version, but the latest but one version. So similarly, you can access all the versions of the file in the S3. So what are the use cases of S3 would be if you want your applications to store something in your S3? S3 is very useful. Let's say you are building something as an artifact for your application. Let's say you're building, like, do build of your application and it produces an artifact. You can store it in S3. And if you have any sensitive data, you can store it in S3 with uh, encryption enabled. So S3 also supports encryption when at rest. So let's say if you're storing, you can say default encryption. So you can automatically encrypt the objects when you're storing in the S3 AWS data center. So once the file is uploaded, it gets encrypted and stored. And when you're retrieving it, AWS takes care of decrypting it and gives you the response. For added security, you can also encrypt at rest. And there are different classes of S3 supported by AWS. I'll quickly show S3 classes, storage classes of AWS. So S3 standard, S3 intelligent trading is just recently announced. S3 standard IA, S3 one zone IA, S3 glacier, S3 glacier deep archive are the most widely used S3 storage classes which are available. So what are the difference between them is S3 standard is whatever we get seen is called as S3 standard. You are able to upload a file, you are able to retrieve it file very quick, and this file is actually stored for redundant. So which means, like, let's say you selected Indian Mumbai region when you are uploading the file, and it would have uploaded this file in one of the availability zone, one of a region within Mumbai. So let's say what happens if that region in Mumbai gets fired, or it gets some, if that region gets crashed, or if there is no network to reach to that region, and if you need the file immediately. So it would be difficult to access because there is no network to that particular region in Mumbai. So what AWS does it spreads the same file, copies the same file in multiple different availability zones within the same region, so that if one of the availability zone goes down, you can still retrieve the file very quick. So that's why you can see the key features of S3 standard: low latency and high throughput performance, designed for durability of 99.9999 uh, across multiple availability zones. The same file is copied in multiple availability zones. So resilient against events that impact an entire availability zone. Let's say one complete availability zone is down, you can still access the file because it is there in a different availability zone. Designed for 99.99% availability, supports SSL, so like an encryption of data at rest, and it supports S3 lifecycle management. So S3 lifecycle management is nothing but you can add rules to your objects you are uploading in S3 such that if there is no change happens to a file for 30 days, move it to a different S3 storage. So that way, uh, let's consider an use case where you're uploading your log files of your application to S3. So now for the latest log, you would be looking at only the latest logs, maybe like for logs of 90 days. Where would you need to store the logs which are very old, like older than 90 days? You would not retrieve it very fast. You need not to retrieve it very quick. You may need it in future for analytics. So what you can do is move it to a less cost storage class so that AWS will not immediately return the file. It would take minutes or hours to return the file. So that's what the different storage class differences. So if you want to quickly retrieve it, you can use S3 standard or S3 standard IA or S3 one zone IA. If you are okay that AWS returns the file in few minutes delay or few latency, then you can go for Glacier. So I'll quickly show the difference here. So just look at this first byte latency. So in all S3 standard, intelligent tiering, S3 standard IA, S3 one zone IA, I can retrieve the file within a milliseconds which means like once I request for a file, I can retrieve the file in milliseconds. If your file is in S3 Glacier or S3 Glacier Deep Archive, it would take minutes or hours to return the file because AWS moves the file from standard storage of S3 to a low, like high latency storage, which means send to you. This is one major difference between the S3 storage class. The other one to look at is availability zones. So if you see S3 standard, S3 intelligent tiering, S3 standard IA, it uploads your file in greater than or equal to three different availability zones, which means if two of your availability zones are down, you can still be able to retrieve the file. In case of S3 one zone IA, it uploads in only one availability zones so that if that availability zone goes down, you would not be able to retrieve that file. All this has a cost difference as well. So if you are very particular about you want to reduce your cost and not worried about availability zone, you can choose S3 one zone IA, and each different class has its own cost. So that's the different storage class in S3. So I'll stop here before I move on to static website hosting. Let me know if you have any questions on S3.
Hey Gauri, this is Naveen here.
Yes. Yeah,
I have
Naveen.
one question regarding this S3. See, what would be the
Yeah.
impact in cost and bucket size due to this enabling the versioning? So every time when it stores the version, does it also hold the memory space?
Yes. So your cost is included for the number of versions of your object. So let's say
Okay,
you have like five objects of let's say if you have versioning disabled and if you upload five different objects, it would be the same cost when you are uploading one object of five different versions.
okay, got it.
So like that's where you can also have lifecycle management to move based on your versions as well. So I can
Mhm.
say last 10 versions can go to S3 Glacier and keep only the latest version. So that way you can reduce your cost for the latest versions, and the older versions can go into a different S3 storage to reduce your cost.
Got it. Thanks, Gauri.
Okay, I'll quickly summarize on like what static website hosting is. So S3 supports a feature called static website hosting. So static website hosting is nothing but if you want to host some of your application as a website, and it doesn't involve any process, or it doesn't involve, if it is just a static, then you can use S3 to host your website. So let's say you have a website which shows your name and your image with no server required, then you need not to create a HTTP server, upload that HTML file and use it to render. Instead, what you can do is just create a bucket, upload your index.html file, and that can be rendered. So let me quickly create a HTML file and load it for you. So I think I have created one. Okay, so I have created an index.html. So let me quickly show the content of the index.html. Okay. So I created a HTML with head tag, like I put title, and then I'm including a file, kickdrum.png. So which the file exists here. So if I open this file, index.html, you can see this loads the index file with an image of our Kickdrum logo. So now let's say if I want to host this somewhere, let's say like if I want to if somebody needs to access this website uh, from anywhere in the world. So what you can do is either you create a server, upload this HTML file, and give the URL, like similar to how we did it in EC2 instance last day. You can do that, which requires an EC2 server to be running, and you have to pay for your EC2 machine. And yeah, so you have to pay for EC2 machine for just hosting a HTML file. So instead of doing that, you can use S3 with a lower price. So here you would be paying only for how many files you are uploading, and you are not paying for any servers. So how we can do it is, let me go ahead and create a bucket. Okay, I'm hosting it in AP. I'm disabling block view access because the file has to be accessed by public. So I'm removing the setting, and I'm just turning on I acknowledge, then create the bucket. Okay, so I just created this bucket, navigating to the bucket to upload the index.html file and the image file. So index.html and the PNG file. So let me upload. Okay, you can see the index.html and Kickdrum logos available here. So let me go to properties. There is an option called static website hosting. So if you click this, it says use this bucket to host a website. So what it gives me is it gives an URL which can be used to access this website. So let me enable this, and it asks what is the index document. So as we mentioned, by default index.html, and since we created index.html in the folder, I choose index.html should be the default file should be loaded when you hit this URL. And if you want any error document, you can also add error.html. So for now, I'm just adding only index.html and then save it. So I'll just quickly copy this URL. So let me copy this. Let me try to access this website. So you can see it says access denied, forbidden. So the reason is we only made the bucket level settings to make public, but we did not make the files to be public. So what I'll do is I'll select all the files and then click make public. So now I'm making both the files as public now. And then let me hit this URL again. So if you see, I don't give any index.html. Instead, what I'm giving is just the URL, and you can see the image is getting loaded. I mean, so I don't give any index.html in the URL. It's just a website. For example, you can create gaurish.com and then point to this bucket. And then like if you hit gaurish.com, it can load the content which you are putting in the index.html file. So this way it helps in reducing the cost as well as uh, keeps it very easy to create a website which is very static, which prevents the usage of server, which prevents any additional cost. So it is only the cost of your bucket and a default price for the CNAME, which if you want to point this to a particular website, you would be paying for that. That's the only cost you would be incurred. Whereas if you use server, you have to pay for your server, you have to pay for the storage and everything. So that's about like how you can use S3 bucket for hosting a static website. So any questions? Okay, I think we have 15 more minutes. So if you have any questions regarding any other services, like feel free to ask me. Like we can spend this 15 minutes for any open questions. If you don't have any questions on S3 or Lambda. Uh, Umet, like it would be, I don't want to set the different context here because I'm not sure if everybody would be familiar with code build. I can give a quick on high level, like what is code build. So code build is one of the service provided by AWS where you can use this code build to build your applications. So let's say you have a Maven application and you can use code build to build your application using, if let's say you are using mvn clean install, just giving a high level simple example. So let's say mvn clean install is the command you use to create an artifact of your Maven project. So what you can use in code build is it can point to a repository. So let's say if you're using GitHub or Bitbucket, you can integrate your code build with the repositories. And let's say if you make any commits to your GitHub or Bitbucket, you can instruct your AWS to trigger the code build. So code build will download the complete artifact, complete repository, and runs the command whatever you specify, and then creates the artifact. And you can also instruct your artifacts to be stored in S3, so that let's say mvn clean install gives you application.zar. So you can upload that application.zar to S3 using code build, and you can download the zar file from S3 and run your application or deploy into any of the EC2 machine. So on high level, code build is just a service which helps you in building your applications or do perform certain commands against a uh, function, against a list of files. So if you want to go deeper on any other services, uh, like we will send out a feedback form, like where you can mention like if you want to go deeper, like if you want to do a similar training course on a different services, please let us know. Like we can organize another session on other services as well. So I have gotten some idea on AWS, but how do I learn it in detail? Should I do any course? If so, please mention which course. Okay. Uh, so one of the best course to learn about AWS is like it depends on which path you want to go. Like if you want to be a developer or as a solution architect, like both are similar, except that if you want to develop something using AWS, like if you want to code, if you want to make changes more in AWS, then you would take a developer path. Whereas in architect, you would know how things work, how n different services can integrate each other. So like in that case, you would go with architect path. So there is a course in Udemy for solutions architect, which is a good course to take. So it's called as it's by A Cloud Guru actually. So which is available in Udemy for a lesser price. It should be for less than 1K INR. And you can like I'll get you a link. Wait. Yeah. So this is the like I actually use this course to uh, learn about AWS as a fundamentals. Then no more questions. So if you don't have any questions, feel free to ask me any questions on my LinkedIn, or you can also follow us to know about more such trainings. We are also uploading our trainings into our YouTube channel. You can access our YouTube channel or subscribe to get notified about all these trainings which we are uploading to our YouTube channel. So I'll send out this deck to you so that you can refer this deck as well.
Okay, so if there is anything else, I want to thank Gaurish for these wonderful sessions. Thank you, Gaurish. I hope the people on this call are now interested enough about AWS that they are. You guys are now going to take this to next step and actually start working on AWS. That would be a big win for us for conducting this training. We will be sending out, like Gaurish said, a feedback form. So please fill that out and tell us what we did well and what we could do even better for future trainings, and likewise also call out some topics that you would like to hear from us in the future. Please follow us on LinkedIn so you can get notified about such trainings. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Gaurish, for the wonderful sessions. Really appreciate it. Goodbye.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Gaurish.